We will move swiftly to the next statement. On infected blood, Paymaster General Jeremy Quin.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And with your permission, I'd like to make a statement to update the House on our preparations for the infected blood inquiry, which is expected to conclude next year. I took over as sponsoring Minister of the inquiry on the 25th of October. While I've been aware of this issue for many years, as so many of us have been from affected constituents, undertaking this role has further impressed upon me its scale and gravity. Not only the direct, dreadful consequences on victims, but the stigma and trauma experienced by many of those infected, their families, and those who care for them. I recognise that, tragically, we continue to see victims of infected blood die prematurely. I recognise that time is absolutely of the essence. I commend the work of the APPG on haemophilia and contaminated blood, and I'm pleased to have met the co-chairs, the Honourable Lady, the member for Kingston upon Hull North, and the Father of the House, and I'm grateful for their insight. In July 2017, my Right Honourable friend, the member for Maidenhead, established the Infected Blood Inquiry, chaired by Sir Brian Langstaff. My predecessor as Paymaster General, the Leader of the House, went further by commissioning a study under Sir Robert Francis KC on compensation and redress for the victims of infected blood, recommendations for a framework. The purpose of this study was clear: to ensure that the government is in a position to be able to fully consider and act on the inquiry's recommendations. Sir Robert delivered his study in March of this year. It was the intention of the government to publish a response to the study alongside the study itself, ahead of Sir Robert's evidence for the Sir Brian Langstaff inquiry. But as the then Paymaster General explained, the sheer complexity and wide range of factors revealed in Sir Robert's excellent work meant that when the study was published by the government on the 7th of June, it was not possible to publish a comprehensive response. The government remained absolutely committed to using the study to prepare for the outcome of the Langstaff inquiry, and this remains the case. Sir Brian Langstaff published an interim report on the 29th of July on interim compensation in response to Sir Robert's own recommendations. This recommendation called for an interim payment of £100,000 to be paid to all those infected and all bereaved partners currently registered on UK infected blood support schemes, and those who registered between the 29th of July and the inception of any future scheme. This recommendation was accepted in full by the government on the 17th of August. Quite rightly, huge work across government was undertaken over the ensuing weeks to ensure that the interim payments could be exempt from tax and disregarded for benefits, and that an appropriate delivery mechanism existed. This involved work across multiple departments and with the devolved governments in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. Interim compensation is just one part of our overall response, but it was important we got it right. I fully recognise that interim compensation was but one of the recommendations in Sir Robert's study. I want to stress to the House and the many people who have a direct and personal interest in the inquiry that those interim payments were only the start of the process, and work is ongoing in consideration of Sir Robert's other recommendations. I am pleased that the interim payments were all made by the end of October. Sir Robert recognised in his study that the government cannot give in advance a commitment on the exact shape that redress will take. Our comprehensive response must await the final report of the Infected Blood Inquiry. However, I want to assure those affected that this government, which delivered a statutory inquiry and interim compensation, remains absolutely committed to our intentions in commissioning the compensation framework study. Accordingly, and recognising the need to continue to build trust with the affected community, I want to share with the House the progress we are making. A cross-government working group, coordinated by the Cabinet Office, is taking forward work strands informed by Sir Robert's recommendation, and at a cross-departmental group of permanent secretary level has been convened, chaired by the Cabinet Office Second Permanent Secretary, Sue Gray, to oversee this work. I'm pleased to be able to say that Sir Robert has agreed to provide independent, transparent advice to this group as work progresses. I'm grateful to him for his continued input into our thinking. It is my intention over the coming months to update the House on progress and, where it is possible, to provide greater clarity on the government's response to Sir Robert's recommendations prior to Sir Brian's report being published. In the meantime, I wish to make clear to the House one critical answer to a recommendation posed by Sir Robert. In the first recommendation of his study, Sir Robert sets out that there is, in his view, a moral case for compensation to be paid. This government accepts that recommendation. There is a moral case for the payment of compensation. We made that clear in our actions with the payment of interim compensation. I now want to make it equally clear on the floor of this House. The government recognises that the scheme utilised must be collaborative and sympathetic, and as user-friendly, supportive and as free of stress as possible, whilst being consistent with the government's approach to protecting against fraud. The government will ensure those principles are adopted. We do have significant work to do in order to ensure that we are ready for Sir Brian's report. For example, Sir Robert makes detailed findings and recommendations about the delivery of the scheme, which must be worked through in discussion with the devolved administrations. And work will need to be undertaken to ensure, in line with his recommendation, that final compensation can be made free of tax and disregarded for benefits purposes. We know, too, that the inquiry will make recommendations in relation to bereaved parents and children. In his interim report, Sir Brian made clear his view that the moral case for their compensation is beyond doubt. Sir Brian recognised that the approach to compensating this group of people is complex, and the government must be ready to quickly address recommendations relating to them. The work in consideration of the study will ensure that the government is prepared to act swiftly in response to Sir Brian Langstar's final recommendations related to compensation. Those infected and affected have suffered enough. Having commissioned both the inquiry and the report, the government has further shown its commitment in our actions by the payment of interim compensation. Sir Brian and Sir Robert have both ensured that the voices of those infected and affected are front and centre of their work, and I too hope to be able to meet and hear from people directly affected as our work progresses. We have much to do, but I wish to assure the House, and this is why I wish to be here today, that this is a priority for the government and we will continue to progress it. I commend the statement to the House.
Shadow Minister Florence Ashalomi.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Minister for this statement, which is welcomed but long overdue. It is very disappointing that the government did not find time for an oral statement in the House earlier this year when they published Sir Robert's report. Ministers were dragged kicking and screaming to publish that report when it was leaked. And it is a pattern throughout this long, painful process, and it seems no different today. I know victims of the contaminated blood scandal will be watching with great interest today. Heartbreakingly, many of those affected have not lived to see today's debate and the prospect of proper justice at the end of this inquiry. My right honourable friend, the member for Kingston upon North, Hull North, has tirelessly campaigned to raise awareness about this issue. But throughout that time, more than 3,000 people have died, and statistics from the Terence Higgins Trust show that between the start of this inquiry in July 2017 and February 2022, some 419 infected people have died. Madam Deputy Speaker, I know personally how important this issue is and what it is like to have a loved one rely on clean blood supply. My late mother suffered from sickle cell anemia, and because of this disease, she required regular blood transfusions, which were vital. And without those blood transfusions, her life would have ended a lot earlier. I cannot imagine the pain and trauma experienced by families who were let down by basic failures of standards. The least they deserved was a prompt and thorough response from the government. While we await the conclusion of this report and inquiry, one person dies every 4 days. Every day that we delay this compensation is justice denied to those people. The Minister owes it to those victims to provide real answers here today. In the recent Westminster Hall debate, his colleague, the Parliamentary Undersecretary, gave a frankly insulting response on this subject, dodging the question and failing to give any certainty about the timeline for payments or the publication of the government's response to the report, which they've had for more than 8 months. Madam Deputy Speaker, victims will not accept empty gestures. With every announcement, it seems to families that the plan changes. So can the Minister make a promise to this House today to publish a timetable for the framework of compensation for those affected by the infected blood scandal? What plans does he have to work in partnership with the infected blood community to develop the compensation framework for those affected by the infected blood scandals? When will he end the government's silence on the other 18 recommendations that have gone ignored? And how will the Minister make sure that everyone who wants to respond to these proposals has the opportunity to do so? Madam Deputy Speaker, rather than sporadic updates without any substance, will the Minister commit to more regular updates on the progress and the direction of travel of this heartbreaking issue ahead of the report next summer? The contaminated blood scandal had a life-changing impact on tens of thousands of victims who were promised the hope of effective treatment. It can only be right that they see the justice they deserve as soon as possible.
Minister.
I thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Honourable Lady for her remarks as well. She spoke movingly of the impact of those infected and affected. I concur with her that time is of the very essence, so I appreciate that she has family reasons to appreciate quite how difficult it must be for people who saw these things happening to their relatives and how awful that process has been. I also appreciate that it is incredibly important, given all that has happened to this community, that trust is built and retained. I certainly commit that we will be updating the House regularly. I can't commit to a timetable. The reason I don't want to commit to a timetable is I don't want to say anything in this House that we can't then meet. There is a very complex series of steps to be taken and work to be done across government and with the devolved administrations. But I can assure this House that it is my intention to update this House as we make progress and as we must do so in order to ensure that those infected and affected are fully appraised of the progress that we are making. I am grateful to both Sir Robert and Sir Brian for the way that they have incorporated the views of those infected and affected in the work that they are doing. The impression that I get and what I'm told is that those infected and affected have really appreciated the engagement they have had through the work that is being undertaken. I hope that that means that the work that is produced by Sir Brian is fully reflective of the thoughts of the community. I've said I wish to meet members of the community. I want to ensure that the work we do is timely and ready to fully consider and respond to the work that Sir Brian does and produces during the course of next year.
Father of the House, Sir Peter Bottomley.
Can I welcome the Minister coming to make an oral statement and to say that we know that both he and the Leader of the House have been deeply involved in this over the months and over the years. The Right Honourable Lady for Kingston upon Hull North, who is the most powerful advocate of trying to hold government to account and get government to come forward, will, I think, want to write, and I'll happily join her, in a whole series of detailed questions to the Minister, some of which he may be able to answer now, and others he may have to say what conditions will need to be met for them to be answered in future. One important thing, to my mind, is letting those who are not yet registered as possibly being entitled to compensation to be able to pre-register, so that when the government comes out in its response to Sir Brian Langstaff's report, that they'll be able to take up that fast and also make up for any missing medical records, which would be a problem to some people who have been affected or infected. The Council welcomed the government accepting the first point of Sir Robert Francis' report about the moral case. Thank you for that. And we're also grateful that Sir Robert is going to be invited to help Sue Gray in also taking forward the work that she's doing. No one should underestimate the amount of work. And my last point, if I may make it, is as and when people get compensation, are they going to be protected from the scams and the so-called financial advisors who may not protect their income and the use of that money? And while talking about that, can the Minister consider whether he can answer whether inheritance tax will not be applied to some of these payments if households are within the inheritance tax limit?
Minister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I should have said it in response to the Honourable Lady, but in response to the Father of the House, greatly appreciated spending time with him and the Honourable Lady, the member for Kingston upon Hull North, who's been a tireless campaigner on this. The entire APPG has, and I very much appreciated the time they spent with me. I absolutely recognise the point on pre-registration. It is one of the issues on the forefront of our minds as we go through this. The Father of the House recognises that there are particular issues, including in relation to medical records that may have been lost over time, dating back decades, and there needs to be a clear system that people will know how to take advantage of the scheme. On the issue of compensation scams, I share my honourable friend's concern. I'm not certain how we'll be able to address that. It is obviously an issue that afflicts many of our constituents in many circumstances, but the way that there is timely advice provided alongside any compensation scheme, I'm sure that's not impossible of being able to be delivered. And in terms of tax, the recommendation is clear that this should be tax-free and should also be disregarded for benefits. In particular, in relation to inheritance tax, there are complexities which need to be examined, and whether or not we need to have legislation is part of that process. But that is one of the issues, absolutely one of the issues we are working on. And if my right honourable friend or other members of the House have detailed questions, they're more than welcome to write to me, and I shall respond to them. Blair.
Patricia Gibson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. We in the SNP pay tribute to those affected by the infected blood scandal, when 1 in 3 of those infected with HIV were children, and their continued decades-long struggle for justice. So today's announcement of a swift response to Sir Robert Longstaff's final recommendations related to compensation is indeed welcome, but the Minister will understand the widespread disappointment that he's unable to commit today to a date for publishing a response to Sir Robert's compensation framework report. He will be aware that there is understandably a significant and remaining lack of trust between those impacted by infected blood, the UK Government and existing support schemes. Recommendation 16 of Sir Robert's study calls for an arm's-length body to administer compensation with independence of judgment and accountability directly to Parliament. So I'm hoping that the Minister will tell us today that he will keep the House updated on the progress of that. Thousands of families across the UK have experienced great trauma after they have cared for loved ones suffering or in many cases dying due to contaminated blood. So does the Minister support the notion of the interim scheme being extended to families and carers who have cared for people with infected blood?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The 2 points in particular from the Honourable Lady. The arm's length body, there's a persuasive case made in recommendation 16. Looking below the principles of that, particularly the independence, we're not yet ready to commit to an ALB, but we definitely want to have a body that will have the trust and the respect of those who we are seeking to support in this. The work is going on as to how that will best be constituted, but the recognition of independence is absolutely key behind the principles of the recommendation of the ALB. And I look forward to updating the Honourable Lady on other issues as the work progresses through the course of this.
Bob Blackman.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I commend my honourable friend for his statement today. Victims of this scandal are clearly cared for by carers, they're cared for by their families. I welcome the fact that the interim payments are exempt from tax and from disregarded for benefits. Has he assessed what the impact of that has been on families, and what should any victim or the family's victims do if they've not been disregarded for benefits and for tax purposes? Is he able to provide assistance for that to make sure that families are receiving the full compensation?
I'm
Minister.
very grateful, honourable friend. They absolutely should have received that. They should have been disregarded. If there is any issues, that should be taken up with the relevant support schemes. But I'd be very welcome to. I'd be delighted to hear from members of this House if they hear particular instances of that, and I will happily take it up on behalf of their constituents. My honourable friend raised this issue of carers, as did the honourable lady. In fact, I think again a very strong recommendation is made during the course of the report. It is an area of deep complexity. As this House will recognise, and I think that is something which may have to wait for Sir Brian Langsar's specific recommendations, but are we thinking through the implications? We absolutely are.
Dame Nia Griffith.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, the disappointment is absolutely tangible. I think of time after time after time, my right honourable friend for Hull North, the Father of the House, and many colleagues have asked about the government response to this report, which was published 8 months ago, and to feel that it's now being kicked into the long grass next summer is deeply disappointing. But I would like the Minister, if he would, could he confirm that the compensation scheme will include the children who lost their parents, often both parents, as the person who's infected was not told and so infected their partner, and also the parents of the 300 plus children who died of AIDS, and that they will in fact receive payments? And will he elaborate on the preparations being made and reassure us that it includes IT systems, secondment and recruitment of staff, training of staff, and most importantly the identification of all those who may be entitled, especially given the stigma that still surrounds contaminated blood?
Minister.
The honourable lady raises a series of excellent points, but I do want to assure her on one point, which is the fact that I'm here today, that we want to talk about this, that we want to make certain that we are making progress, and I wanted to update the House on the progress that is being made, and that I will continue to do so. I hope reassures her how seriously we take this. It was always the intention with the study under Sir Robert that they would help prepare us in order to be ready for Sir Brian's report. That remains the case. The report is absolutely clear, both Sir Robert and Sir Brian, about the moral case for the compensation of the children affected by the loss of parents. It is deeply complex how that is arranged, and that is, Sir Robert himself said it, so Sir Brian Langsar had to do specific work on that, but I totally accept the case being made on behalf of those children. I also accept that there is a huge amount of work, whatever the precise mechanism, in order to ensure that that is up and running as swiftly as possible, from the recruitment of those running it through to IT systems, staff and the like, given the complexity of what they'll be confronted with.
Ian Levy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Could the Minister please clarify for me, did all of those eligible for interim compensation receive their payments on time?
Minister.
I believe that's absolutely the case. I'm pleased to reassure my honourable friend on that. It's also the case under the recommendations that there's still room for people to apply who have not applied to date but meet the recommendations, and that they should be looked after between now and a new scheme coming forward at a future point.
Margaret Greenwood.
Deputy Speaker, one of my constituents has been deeply affected by this issue. In her words, she has endured a long, upsetting and depressing process. The strain on her and her family has been enormous. The Hepatitis C Trust has warned that there are people affected by the infected blood scandal who are falling through the gaps in the present frameworks for financial assistance and compensation, including those whose medical records have been lost and destroyed, which the Minister's already touched on, but I'd like him to expand on, and people who were born abroad. So I would ask the Minister what assessment the government has made of the number of people who fit into this category, or when we can expect to receive such an assessment, and what he will do to put things right.
Minister.
Firstly, I absolutely sympathise with the constituents of the Honourable Lady. I hope, though, since 2017, with the statutory inquiry, with the report, with the payment of interim compensation, they've seen that things are moving in the right direction. We've got a direction of travel. I know, given the weight of loss, that has taken too long. but we are working on it. I recognise that there's issues regarding both Hep C and also in particular Hep B, which Sir Robert, in relation to Hep B, said that Sir Brian needed to take further evidence and medical evidence on that. It is one of those areas, in terms of the absolute complexity, where we may need to wait for the Langstaff report before we can be specific on that. But are we aware of the issues? Yes, we are, and I'm grateful that she's brought it to the House's attention.
Kevin Brennan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I pay tribute to my constituent who lost her beloved husband to this scandal and who recently wrote to me about the sort of disinformation that often is out there, sometimes even from official sources, about this scandal. The Minister said that time is of the essence, to quote him directly. Does he understand why to many of the victims it doesn't feel that way, that time is of the essence in dealing with this? Could he at least tell the House when he would expect this matter to be finally resolved, even if it's not, an exact immediate date, but they need some kind of understanding that closure will come and that they will be compensated appropriately in a timely fashion?
Minister.
I thank the Honourable Gentleman for his question. The direct answer is finality will only come after Sir Brian has reported. That's expected during the course of next year, and for the work to completed by the end of next year. And I know that seems an awfully long time to wait. Our job as a government is to make certain that we are ready to respond to those recommendations. That was why my right honourable friend, the Leader of the House, commissioned Sir Robert's report, and the onus is on us to make certain that we can act swiftly and effectively on the recommendations that are made.
Wayne David.
Sir Brian's report will be published next year. Rather than the Minister simply saying that the recommendations will be acted upon, can he give a firm commitment that the recommendations will be accepted and implemented when they're made?
Minister.
That's a sincerely asked question, and I appreciate the sincerity of the honourable gentleman asking it. I trust that he will understand my sincerity when I say I'm not in a position to give a carte blanche acceptance. The honourable gentleman appreciates that no government minister can do that on behalf of a government for a report they have not yet seen. But have we accepted the moral case for compensation? We have. Have we paid interim compensation? We have. Are we keen to make certain we are in a position to respond effectively when the report is published? Absolutely. We will aim to do exactly that.
Patrick Grady.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I echo the calls from my honourable friend from Ayrshire and Aaron that a way should be found to extend compensation payments to carers. That's particularly important to a constituent that I've heard from. But can he also say a little bit more about exactly when and how he will engage with the devolved administrations and also with survivors and families groups to make sure that they are kept informed and consulted throughout this process?
Minister.
First, I'd like to pay tribute to Sir Brian and Sir Robert for the work they've done in ensuring that they are speaking to those affected in the communities, and I would like to personally speak to those members of the communities as well as we progress our work. Contacts already ongoing with the devolved administrations. We all have to work together on the interim compensation scheme. It's critical that we do work together. This is a UK-wide issue, and I'm sure we'll be able to work collaboratively to ensure we get the right answers to those who've been infected and affected.
Debbie Abrams.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I thank the Paymaster General for his statement. I know that he is committed to this and he will bring his personal commitment to make sure that this is resolved as soon as possible. One of my constituents lost 4 family members, her brother, sister-in-law, aunt and cousin. Her 10-year-old nephew was orphaned and left to be brought up by her mother on a state pension. They have received not a penny. So I appreciate the complexities in working out the timetable. But for him, he's now in his late 30s, you can't imagine the trauma that he has gone through, losing his parents, the stigma of their deaths. He can't wait any longer. These people need support and compensation now. So if he could come in the new year not necessarily with a detailed timetable, but with a timetable for next year. That would be very helpful. Thank you.
Minister.
I think the Honourable Lady spoke for so many people in this House about talking through some specific heart-rending examples, and the type of circumstance that the Honourable Lady refers to, it's no wonder that Sir Robert and Sir Brian have made clear their view in terms of the moral case. I absolutely recognise what she would like me to do, which is to present a timetable. I will do my utmost in the new year to set out the steps we'll be taking. I don't want to commit to anything that we're not going to meet, and the Honourable Lady will appreciate that, and she does recognise the complexity. But I want to reassure people that the work is underway to ensure that we're ready for the Langstaff report.
Stephen Kinnock.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My constituent David Ferrugia is the part of what's called the fatherless generation, and the scandal and the length of time that it's taken to address these issues has had a profound effect on his mental health, as I'm sure the Minister can imagine. Does the Minister agree that the children of victims, for them there is a clear and compelling moral case for compensation, which they're not currently eligible for? And if he does agree that there's a clear and compelling moral case, can he set out when the compensation will be forthcoming?
Minister.
I thank the Honourable Gentleman. The case, the moral case for compensation for children was specifically referred to by Sir Robert and Sir Brian. The interim compensation payments was arranged in a way by, it was recommended, we accept the recommendation in full by Sir Brian, in order, amongst other things, to be as swift as possible, which was defined its terms. That does not mean that children are being ignored in this process. As I say, the moral case was set out in the report, and we as a government have accepted a moral case for compensation to be paid.
Tonia Antoniazzi.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The stigma that is sadly still attached to diseases associated with contaminated blood makes it hard for victims to come forward. What are the government doing to tackle that stigma and ensure that every victim of contaminated blood is found and receives support? And may I take this opportunity to ask for reassurances that every victim across the United Kingdom and across the devolved administrations is found and given that support?
Minister.
Look, I absolutely recognise what the Honourable Lady. It's one of the most distressing things, and it was only really when I got this brief that I really worked through the implications, was the stigma. Was the fact that this was happening in an era when people were not enlightened on AIDS and HIV, and the consequences on families were extraordinary. And I fear, as the Honourable Lady does, that that stigma can still be retained today. So the point she makes that the scheme must be not only as easy as possible and as easy to access as possible, but must be well publicised, and people should be invited to be part of it, must be part of the final approach, and that all those who have a case are given support in order to be part and receive the compensation that will be outlined.
And finally, Jim Shannon.
I thank the Minister. It's very clear that from those on the floor that there's a sense of urgency, and I perceive by the Minister's responses that he grasps that urgency as well, and I thank him for that. Can the Minister confirm that the route to compensation in the devolved nations, Northern Ireland in particular, but also for Scotland, Wales and for England, will be straightforward and simply not a quagmire in which people seek professional and costly advice which eats into compensation and adds stress to the very process and to the persons themselves?
Minister.
I would absolutely want to give that reassurance to the Honourable Gentleman. Sir Robert looked at a number of alternatives. There is a scheme operated in the Irish Republic, which is more of a common law approach. His recommendation is that we must do something that is simpler and easier to access, and that after all the suffering that's taken place, you do not want to layer onto that the complexities of having to seek expensive advice to get part of a scheme. So we absolutely want to do something that is simple, easily accessible, and indeed that we are able to ensure that everybody who is owed compensation is in a position to secure it.
Thank you. That concludes the proceedings on the statement.